Welcome to the Old Stoney's podcast right here on Talkcast PDX. Justin McDonald here, minus my normal companion, Matt Crissione. Is out on the road, headed to Yellowstone, so he's going to go out and see the world, if you will, and he'll be back next week, so we look forward to having him back in the studio. But we thank you so much for joining us right here on Talkcast PDX. And yours truly, Justin McDonald. I have a great guest today, so I want to jump right on into it. We're going to bring on Leah Mauer from the Weed Blog. Do you guys prefer the Weed Blog or weedblog.com? How do you like to say it?
Hi there, because either one you type in is going to get you there.
That's good. That's good. Now, the Weed Blog has been around for a very long time in terms of websites, correct?
Correct.
How long actually has it been around?
I believe it started in 2010.
2010. Yeah, that's a good run so far. Now,
yeah. Early days of the internet.
Yeah, give me a little bit about your background, how you got to the Weed Blog, and how that started.
Sure thing. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on today. I'm really excited to have this discussion with you. But yeah, so the weedblog.com is a cannabis news and information site, and not actually something I ever thought I might be doing, because my story with cannabis started really, my story with cannabis started a long time ago, but my story really with cannabis activism sort of had the seed planted for me in 2009 in the middle of Missouri when my husband and I had a SWAT raid in our home in Columbia, Missouri. Yeah, three different law.
Yeah, that's just got to be one of the most scariest things ever.
It was scary.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it just seems like it would be terrifying.
It was. It really was. Still to this, I mean, I have PTSD from it to this day, like it's very, even, a UPS man comes to my house to drop something off and I get, tight in my chest. And, it took me a while to not even have like anxiety attacks when people were coming to my house unannounced, because it was such a scary thing. Because that day it was keep in mind, this is in 2009 in the middle of Missouri. And we were growing a small amount of cannabis in our basement. There was three different, law enforcement bodies. There was the Columbia Police Department, there was the Missouri State Highway Patrol, and there was also what was called the Mustang Task Force, which was a drug substance task force essentially for things such as that. And it was something that I just didn't really think ever happened in places like where I was at. We lived in a brand new neighborhood. We lived in, in a new house where all the, in a neighborhood that was a new subdivision where all the houses were kind of like little cookie cutter, versions of each other with paved sidewalks and all that stuff. Neither my husband or myself had any priors on our records at the time. And the way that we were treated that day, you would have thought we were like harboring terrorists in our basement or something like that, rather than growing a plant. Yeah. So it was very eye-opening to me in a lot of ways. And we did move from Columbia, Missouri out here to Portland, Oregon, just 3 months after that experience happened, because we knew we had to get out and get where the drug laws were a little friendlier. And while we didn't have, the laws here in Portland and specifically in Multnomah County, we felt very protected moving here to Oregon and being able to continue to work and speak freely with cannabis.
When you got ready to move to Oregon, I mean, did you do that kind of research, like where we want to be?
Yeah, we did. We absolutely did. We looked at a lot of different places. Again, it being 2009, there was some kind of interesting things happening in Ohio at that time. There was certainly a lot happening in Colorado, and certainly things up and down the coast in California. But a lot of the places that we looked at for whatever, like the laws in Colorado, even at the time, were still very, very limited, as they were in Ohio and anywhere on the East Coast. And really a lot of the places we looked at in California even were just, we had 2 young children at the time. Our children were only 1 and 3 when this happened. And we, all the places we looked at in California were just completely out of our budget. There was just no way we were going to be able to move on a whim with the very limited resources we had at that time. And then, having to deal with my husband Travis's arrest and the legal fees and all of the moving fees, there was just no way. So we absolutely looked at Portland, Oregon in 2009 as sort of a mecca for thought leadership in the area of cannabis law reform, and knew that we would be protected here because of the medical laws and the decriminalization laws that were in place at the time. And we also knew from what we had read and from what people here were telling us that there was a lot of conversations happening here already about adult use cannabis and about, other areas of drug law reform. So we kind of thought, well, we'll give it a shot. And if, it doesn't work, we'll move back in a year later and, live in my parents' basement and figure it out. But thankfully it did work. And here we are still in Portland, Oregon to this day.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And then you guys came to Portland, and then you settled in, you
Mhm.
root in, right? You
Yep.
start getting involved in things. What was the big, hey, we're here now, we're
Yeah.
involved, let's get this going moment?
Yeah, well, and I got to give my husband Travis a lot of the credit for really sort of, getting into the activism and really sort of, meeting the people on the ground here that he didn't already know that were really doing a lot of the hard work, because we're so grateful for all of those people that pioneered us to get us here. But we watched, we moved here in 2009. We watched a legalization measure in 2010 fail. We watched a legalization measure in 2012 fail. And after that, we were kind of like, okay, maybe this isn't happening the right way. And Travis really kind of, pulled everybody together and got everybody talking and pulled sort of a coalition of people together. And he and I, together with them, co-founded New Approach Oregon in 2013, which is the organization that ended up founding and drafting and running the Measure 91 campaign here in 2014.
Right.
And so my real moment, up until this point in time, keep in mind, my degree was in education. I was a public school teacher in Missouri before I had our first child. And during the time of the raid, I'd been a stay-at-home mom for about 3 years at that point in time. And so fast forward all the way up until 2013, I had still been a stay-at-home mom all that time. And so in 2014, when the campaign was really starting to get going and it was really getting traction and stuff, I started a group called Moms for Yes on Measure 91. And I just started it as a Facebook group. I had a little bit of support from the campaign. And they kind of said, once you can get a little traction in this, then we can start, really incorporating it into the campaign. Well, I mean, it just kind of spoke to where Oregon was at, because within a week I had 100 people in the group, and within a month there was over 1,000 people in the group. And this was not a see-through, this was not a nonprofit or anything. This was just like a community-based organization,
That's
grassroots
fast growth for anything.
Right? No, it was just totally grassroots activism.
That's awesome.
So what happened was, I, was just kind of trucking along. I was the president of the PTA at my kid's school at the time. I'm wearing my Yes on Measure 91 t-shirt into the, PTA meetings and carpool and stuff like that, really kind of hoping more so, that I would get people that were more skeptical about the measure than people that were actually supporting it, so that I could have that conversation with them. And towards the very end of the campaign, I think voting day that year was like November 4th or something like that. And on about October 20th-ish, somewhere in there, I got a call from the communications director at the campaign, Peter Zuckerman, and he said, hey, so we know that the No on 91 campaign is going to be running a press conference today, and it's going to be, or maybe it was the night before, they're going to be running a press conference tomorrow, and they're going to have law enforcement there. They're going to have a bunch of teachers there. They're basically flying this mom in from Colorado who had already legalized adult use cannabis in 2012. And remember, this is 2014. So they flew a mom in, they were flying a mom in from Colorado to basically say, the sky is falling, don't legalize it. All the kids are going to be harmed. It's going to be horrible. Don't do it. And he was like, we would really like to do, a press conference that is on the converse of that. And we would like for you to, basically lead it, to be in the front of it. And so this is me, like, stay-at-home mom. I've done minimal, I'd done a few little, speaking. I had spoken at a few of the Measure 91 meetings with like legislators and policymakers and lobbyists and things like that. But I'd never done anything like this. And so I'm like, okay, this feels important. And I really think, that experience in 2009, when I really had, that when I had the experience of having that SWAT raid and having my husband's mugshot posted on the, front of the very small town, media the very next day, and having the story completely sensationalized because it was involving cannabis in the middle of Missouri in 2009, I had almost all my like mom friends, I'll call them, that I was doing playgroup with on the weekly. We were going to the pool together, going to the park together, things like that. Every single one of them turned their back on me.
I was going to ask you, did they shun you?
They completely shunned me. It was awful. It was really, and it really made me question myself as a person. It made me question my ethics. It made me question my morals, because I was left feeling like I was a bad person. And so I just, eventually, on my own, as I was healing from those wounds of just being hurt by people that I thought were my friends, were like, yes, it was illegal, But what we were doing was not immoral. We were giving the cannabis, we were
Yeah.
going to cancer patients, we were giving it to AIDS patients, we were giving it to people that had other conditions, that it was helping them, not have to be on pharmaceuticals at the time. And so I knew what we were doing wasn't a bad thing. And at the end of the day, it's a plant. But it took me, a while to be able to sort of feel comfortable with that in my own skin because of the way these other moms made me feel. So again, fast forward to this press conference at the end of 2014, right before the vote was going to be made. That experience of being shunned kind of like helped me be able to like really put my face out there, really put my family out there at a time when I felt like civic engagement and political activism was just of the utmost importance. And I was able to be like, you know what, if people don't like me because of this, if people won't allow their children to play with my children because of this, I already know what that feels like. And so I can do this,
Yeah, too bad. Yeah, too bad for them. That's what I say.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been acquainted over the years.
Yeah.
I've known of you, and we finally met in person a couple times. And I know Travis, and I see your social media. Your kids look amazing. You look like you guys just have so much fun all the time.
Thanks.
Which
We try.
yeah, it's awesome. How did you? I mean, you had to manage the family and everything at the same time. And how do some people are like, hey, how do you talk to your kids, about this stuff? I've always been open and honest with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
But, what advice do you give to people? I mean, if people ask you that question, how do you deal with your
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah.
with the cannabis thing? That's a legitimate question, I
It's
think.
a totally legitimate question. It happens all the time. And I was just on a clubhouse session this last weekend with one of my favorite platforms, the High Society Moms Club in there. And that was actually the topic of discussion. And I can't tell you how many times I've been asked that question by media. I've been asked that question, by other canna moms, like that. I've been asked that question just, by other people that are exploring the topic in general. And it's very important. And with my family, it did go back, going back to sort of the press conference moment of when, I stood up and I did the press conference with, all these cameras pointing at me and the news reporters. Like I had no idea what I was walking into, but I knew I needed to nail it, not just for the sake of the campaign, but for the sake of my own family. My kids were already seeing me be an activist. They had seen, we went to, the ban the plastic bag rallies here. We've gone to rainforest things. We've gone to, climate action things. So like they've seen me do activism throughout their lives, but the focus really shifted to be, much more on cannabis activism, in 2014. Which is when our third child at that time, I guess, was 3. So, our other kids were 10 and 8. So that's about how old they were when the campaign was happening, when adult use legalization happened here. So I feel like I have to preface the answer to your question with the fact that a lot of my conversations with my kids about cannabis have happened in the state of Oregon, where I can speak to them very candidly because of the laws here. I'm not someone that's in a prohibition state that's totally having to hide my use like many, many mothers are out there.
Right.
So I think, whether, what I tell people, if they're in a prohibition, what I tell other moms if they're in a prohibition state or a state with like very limited legalization where they're truly afraid of child protective services stepping in or getting arrested or something like that because they have cannabis. I think it's really important to make sure your kids are of age to know what the laws are there first. And a parallel that was drawn in the Clubhouse communication last weekend that I thought was really good was like, you talk about having private conversations with your family and public conversations with your family. And, private conversation being one, one of the parallels that was drawn with this group of moms on Sunday was you don't go to school and talk about your private parts, right? And so you also don't want to go to school and talk about private things, like things we only talk about as a family, such as, mommy's medicine or whatever they refer to it as when kids are younger. So I do think the laws and the legality are the very first thing to touch on with your children. The second thing I think is to educate them about human development and brain development. Our brains and bodies don't quit developing until we're 25 years old. And even though all adult use options point to 21 at the law, that is what the science says is 25. So I make sure that my kids are equipped with that science so that they know exactly how their body's developing, how long it's going to take to develop. And if they put any substance in their body before it quits developing, whether that be cannabis or alcohol or caffeine or sugar,
whatever,
or pharmaceuticals or any other kind of substance, if they're going to consume it regularly, it is going to have an effect. And so I make sure they understand that first. And then I kind of move into like, what questions do you have about this? And please talk to me about it and not your friends or your friends' older siblings or someone else. Like, I think as parents, we really want to establish that like very trusting, loving, open communication relationship about anything we talk to our kids about, whether that be drugs or sex or gun violence or politics or anything like that. We want to have that trusting, open relationship with them where they feel comfortable coming to us and asking us questions. And then I really just navigate from there. My kids are 16, 14, and 9 now. They all know quite a bit about cannabis and other substances because we feel as parents it's very important to give them, the education about everything so that, especially my teenagers, so as they are moving into young adulthood and going to navigate the world on their own, they're armed with that knowledge so that they can make those decisions for themselves as young people. They're not going to be under our care at all times, and we want them to be out there and being able to make informed decisions. And so far, knock on. And the other thing I'll say is keep them busy with other things that they really enjoy. Once kids get bored, they will start asking questions and peeping into things. And we've really tried to show our kids how many wonderful things there are in life and to really foster the interests and the natural abilities that they have so that those things can make them feel really good. And they're not seeking something external to make themselves feel good, that they can have that intrinsic way of feeling good about themselves and the things that they can do. Because there is a conversation to be had about addiction, certainly. I think that
totally.
something to talk about as well.
Yeah,
so far, so good.
yeah, so far so good. Yeah, my kids are 16 and almost 21. So I'm glad I raised them that way with the science of things. Always open and honest. I think that's very important, especially living in Oregon. And we went from Alaska to Oregon, so it wasn't quite like going from Missouri to Oregon. Alaska is nice and relaxed as well. So there was always that talk. So let's talk about the Weed Blog. How did the Weed Blog start, and how long has it been operating? Because I'm curious, because I go to the weedblog.com quite a bit.
Yes. So, like I said, it started in 2010, which is, like I said, kind of in the very first days of the internet. So, it's just a cannabis news and information authority that's been around for a long time. My husband, Travis, bought into the Weed Blog with his two former partners that founded it in 2012. And so I kind of was around the Weed Blog by proxy, because of him all the way up until I kind of came into it more full time in 2017, early 2017, I believe is when I started doing a little bit more work. And it's been, one of my main work focuses since then. So
yeah, I discovered it in like 2013. I was still in Alaska at the time.
Nice.
And so I knew about it. And then when I came to Oregon in 2015 and then started working in the cannabis industry, I was like, hey, all right, the Weed Blog, they're close by, and I think this is awesome. So it's still going, it's like, all right.
Yep, it's still going, and it's so interesting. It's almost like if you peep through all of the articles on it, it's almost like looking at a time capsule sometimes, because as you very well know, the cannabis movement and the cannabis industry seems like it's kind of moved at warp speed when you think about how long it takes things to happen politically in this country over the last 5 to 10 years. I would say certainly there's just been leaps and bounds that have been made in so many ways in the cannabis sector in general. And when you see the things that we're able to publish about now, as opposed to what was being published in the very beginning, it's really changed because, there's been more states that have legalized. There's been a lot more policy change. The market has grown. The consumer base has grown. The industry has grown. So there's just so much more there. And, the Weed Blog was running way before cannabis was ever covered in mainstream media. And many mainstream media sites now have almost like a cannabis beat or a cannabis reporter that does specific, cannabis or drug law reform reporting, because it's a topic that's discussed so frequently now in current society, which is great.
Don't get me started on some of those people. I can tell you.
I know.
Oh man, let me tell you, I'm just like, what are you writing? I can't believe I just saw this. But so it's active now. It's still rocking and rolling. I check it out probably once a week. How often are you, submitting content? Are you writing on a weekly basis? Or are you doing daily?
No, we have content published daily. Pretty much my primary focus with the blog is I'm the editorial lead is my title, outside of being the co-owner of it. So I manage all the content, all the publishing and things like that. So we do have some different writers that I manage. I would like to be able to write more than I actually can
Yeah.
I really, I love writing. I do a little bit of freelance writing and consulting in the industry as well, which has been, a really great thing to be able to step into a little bit more. But I would like to write more than I actually have time to do, because it's something that I find so satisfying. It's also something that I feel like, I'm really, able to help others by giving them free information about, these topics, whether it be about, politicians that we're backing, which I'm about to publish about today, someone in Oregon, and, or, just basic cannabis science things, different things about different product types, different types of products within different, like the, different product types. And then of course, culture, lifestyle pieces, cooking,
Yeah.
all the different kinds of news, obviously our busiest times of year. We really try to, everything I put out, everything that I look at as the editorial lead, I definitely look through with an advocacy lens of how is this piece, once I publish it, going to be helpful or going to help push the movement forward. Every single thing I publish, I think about that before it goes out. So that's definitely something that is, really important to both Travis and I and the teams that we work with. And so as we get closer to like, election time and voting time, there's always a lot more updates, so that people feel like they can go into their vote informed, and also so that they can, know what's happening as it's coming out.
I smell a collaboration coming, because Matt and I, the old Stonies, we've been talking about Croptober
Oh
and
yeah.
doing our Croptober tour.
Ooh,
Going
yeah.
to a few different farms every week.
Nothing like a Croptober in Oregon, that's for sure.
And doing some live streaming and some other stuff from the actual farms. It'd be nice to have the weed blog chime in a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, keep me posted. I love that idea.
You know what I
love
would
it.
watch? I would watch a podcast every week from theweedblog.com. I would watch that.
Thank
Just so
you.
you know. Just so you know. I just want to let you know.
Thanks.
So the weed blog's running. What else is on your plate? What else other projects do you might have going that you might want to let people know that's happening, if anything? I know I sent you a list of topics. I pretty much haven't touched any of them. I'm just enjoying the conversation. So at the moment, but
Yes, certainly. No, I
what do you have
appreciate you
going on?
asking. I appreciate your asking. Yeah. And kind of going back to what I said about advocacy, I really consider myself to be an activist before I consider myself to be anything else in the cannabis industry or any other industry I might touch on. I consider myself to be an activist, not just for cannabis law reform, but for social justice overall. In the last, I would say maybe 3 years or so, I've gotten a lot more involved in doing some social equity work. So that's been a really exciting thing. I sit on the advisory board for Marijuana Matters, which is specifically cannabis social equity nonprofit that's based in Washington, D.C. So I'd certainly encourage everyone to check them out and the work that they're doing. They're called Marijuana Matters. And I'm also very thankful and proud to say I'm one of the founders of the Oregon Cannabis Equity PAC that is run through the New Leaf Project, which I'm sure you're familiar with. We lobbied for a bill last session called the Equity Investment Act here in Oregon. And we did get stopped at a Senate committee, but we will be lobbying again in the short session coming up, and we're already doing work on that. So the other thing I would ask people specifically here in Oregon to do is to look at the Equity Investment Act that's run by the Cannabis Equity PAC, and to really support our efforts. Please sign our petition, our letters, everything like that. We're just kind of in the stages of doing the footwork for what this next session is going to look like, but expect to be hearing a lot more news about that, both from me on my personal platforms and on the Weed blog. And the other person I guess I would like to throw out there while we're talking Oregon stuff is a woman by the name of Akasha Lawrence Spence, who is running for Senate District 18, I believe. She's running for Senator Jenny Burdick's seat. Jenny Burdick is stepping down after serving quite a long time in the Oregon State Legislature.
And she's been around for a long time.
She has, and she's done some great work. Yeah. And I feel that Akasha is really, really ready for it. She she served one term in the House, and we're really excited to be seeing her go to the Senate. I'm very hopeful about her candidacy there. She was one of the individuals who spearheaded the work group that this PAC that I'm a part of now was sort of born out of, and was absolutely, crucial in the advocacy of the Equity Act and other equity efforts that happened in the Oregon legislature this last session. And I just can't say enough good about her. Her platform completely is rooted in economic justice for everyone in Oregon. And I'll just let you know that there will be something published on the blog about her very soon, and you can read all about her. But speaking specifically to Oregon, those are some things I have coming out, and really just, kind of getting back to school, trying to get back to life a little bit, like a lot of people in Oregon after, coming out of this pandemic. Those are a few other things, that I would mention. And my partner, as far as business goes, Travis and I also have the short code for 2420, and we'll be doing quite a bit of work with that as well. So that will be coming out in other efforts. But all of that is keeping me pretty busy. The other thing that I do that I really enjoy is I'm the chair for Historic Park Rows, which is a neighborhood prosperity initiative funded by Prosper Portland, which is also through the city. And that is not cannabis related at all. It's simply community activism is how I see it. And I've been the chair of the board for 2 years and on the board for 4 now. And we are basically tasked with working with the Park Rows community and the Park Rows business district to make this a more vibrant place to live and develop things as far as the economy and economic growth and the businesses here go.
You need a personal assistant. You're a busy person. I can keep everything straight. Thank God for iPhone, right? Or
sometimes
whatever.
I think I do, but my 16-year-old reminded me this morning that I'm kind of like his personal assistant right now. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, our time is running out here for this episode of the Old Stonies. Leah Maurer from theweedblog.com. I appreciate your time and your candor and all the good stuff, all the stories. And we'll have to have you on again really, really soon. I got to have Matt here, too, because Matt said he had a list of questions. And so I'm sure he could fill some time, too.
Yeah, I would love that, especially as we're getting close to the session, like I said, and we got other things coming down the pipes as far as our activism goes and, business endeavors as well. I would love that. That would be great.
Well, we'll check in with the Weed Blog to see what's happening in the political matters of things. We'll try to do that on a regular basis. So
wonderful.
Awesome. Leah Maurer, thank you so much. Everybody check out theweedblog.com.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Talk to you next time. All right, that's going to do it for the Old Stonies podcast for this week. Hopefully, Matt will be back safe and sound next week. Make sure you check us out on talkcastpdx.com. Make sure and go to budtendershirt.com. Get a shirt. We'd love you to do that. Also, just make sure and keep on smoking. Till next time, we'll see you.